So far, Arizona has been ground zero in the Republican effort to try to uncount the 2020 presidential election. Former President Trump is reportedly obsessed with trying to undo the 2020 election in states that he lost. He has been somewhat desperately making the case that all the other states he lost in must also do what Arizona is doing to cast doubt on his loss in those states. To that end, this week, three Republican state lawmakers from Pennsylvania took a guided tour of the Cyber Ninjas Arizona recount site, complete with, apparently, step-by-step instructions for how they could do this at home. Since Biden won in Pennsylvania, too, so that must be clouded somehow or have suspicions cast on it somehow the way they're trying in Arizona. Those Republican state legislators in Pennsylvania came back home excited to try to mount the same sort of thing in their home state. You'll obviously be able to guess who else loved the idea. The former president today put out a statement praising those Pennsylvania lawmakers by name, calling them great patriots, calling out other Republican leaders in the Pennsylvania state government by name, demanding that they, too, agree to start one of these fake audits or fake recounts in Pennsylvania, actually threatening their re-election prospects as Republican state legislators if they don't go along with this plan. Pennsylvania's Attorney General is a Democrat named Josh Shapiro. He responded to this today by something that has the technical political term of calling bullpucky on it. He said today, quote, Donald Trump lost the 2020 election, not only at the ballot box, but dozens of times in court, and his lies won't change that. If he and his crew of dangerous Harrisburg Republicans try to pull this BS in Pennsylvania again, they will have to go through me. And they will lose again. Joining us now is Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro. Mr. Attorney General, thank you for taking the time tonight. I appreciate you being here on a Friday night.
Good to be with you. I didn't know you could say bullpucky on cable news, but I'm glad to know that we can.
I am willing to endure the fines. I'm willing to do it in order to give the technical term for what you have done today. Let me ask about what you meant by two things that you said. Number one, you called this a crew of dangerous Harrisburg Republicans. What did you mean by dangerous? And what did you mean by they're going to have to go through you?
Look, I don't think we can just simply dismiss these folks as fringe. This is who the modern GOP is. Certainly who the modern GOP is here in Pennsylvania. Heck, one of those three people who went down there is the leading Republican candidate for governor. These are folks who are dangerous. These are folks who are trying to undermine our democracy. These are folks who have no respect for the rule of law. And these are folks who are in charge right now in the legislature.
In terms of the prospects for what they are trying to do, as you say, this is a fringe idea and a radical thing they are trying to do, but they're not necessarily fringe figures within Republican politics. What are the prospects for the state legislature actually trying to do this?
Well, look, let's go through the law and then let's go through reality. Okay, the law affords some state lawmakers and some committees the opportunity to issue subpoenas. But subpoenas aren't fishing expeditions. Subpoenas need to be tied to a specific and legitimate legislative purpose. And simply following an order or being the errand boy for Donald Trump is not a legitimate legislative purpose. But were they to go forward and try and issue subpoenas and put on the sham audit like what we're seeing in Arizona, they would have to go through me. And my track record of defending the voters here in Pennsylvania and standing up to this bullpucky or whatever you called it is pretty darn good. Every time we've gone to court, we've won and we've protected the voters here in Pennsylvania. And I'll do it again if I have to.
Let me ask you about the sort of strength of feeling and the strength of commitment on the other side of this among these Republicans who want to do it. American Oversight, which is a sort of ethics watchdog group, today, they published hundreds of pages of emails they got through a public records request from the Arizona Cyber Ninjas recount thing that they're doing there. And it included, the documents they got included emails from the Republican Senate president there who has orchestrated this whole thing, bragging to a constituent about her personal contact with former President Donald Trump, who has been personally calling her and thanking her for doing what they're doing in Arizona. She's not only received that direct pressure from Donald Trump, she's talking about her direct contact with the former president, bragging about it to her constituents. I mean, how much sort of heft can be brought to bear, how much pressure can be brought to bear simply by the former president singling out these Republicans by name, making a public show of this and pushing them to do it?
Well, clearly Donald Trump pulls the strings of the modern day Republican Party, and certainly the leadership of the Republican Party here in Pennsylvania, at least those who aspire to statewide office and those who still have the power within the legislature. I will tell you that Donald Trump's conduct here is highly unethical, but that's nothing new for the former president. It would be unbelievably unethical for a lawmaker who takes an oath of office, not just to the Constitution of the United States, but also the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, to use their authority as a lawmaker to carry out Donald Trump's wishes, to try and perpetuate the big lie, and to do so not just on the taxpayer's dime, but on the taxpayer's time. This election was won by Joe Biden. It was lost by Donald Trump here in Pennsylvania. And Rachel, we've already had 2 legitimate audits that comported with the laws here in Pennsylvania, and audits that showed the results that I said before. If they were to go forward with this sham audit, they would have to go through me. They will not succeed, and they will be violating their oath of office, and I believe also committing some very serious unethical conduct.
Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro, thank you very much for joining us. It'll be interesting to see how the sort of churn on this continues to develop. I expect over the course of this weekend it's probably going to get worse, but you're drawing a pretty bright line here, sir. Thanks for helping us understand.
Thank you, Rachel.